Welcome to the Pastor's Podcast. Pastor Scott here with Joon and Allison Kang.
What's up?
Hello.
I feel like every time we ever say your name from the stage, we're spelling it because of your email address.
Oh yeah.
So you just say like right? It's always like you can email Joon, Joon. You can at cornerstonewla.org.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So you were saying before I hit record that you've done this before.
Oh yeah.
That you are old hat at the podcast microphone type thing.
Oh yeah. So well, I'm excited for this story because if my buddies listen to this, shout out to you guys who were there with me at the radio at the recording studio. But like 5 years ago, there's like this Christian radio station that's like located in Glendale somewhere, and there's a pastor in Thousand Oaks who just would invite like a couple of like my friends who were like theology majors to like speak at this radio show, and they talk about deep things, stuff that I like didn't know anything about, especially 5 years ago. And they're just like, hey, you should just hop on the show. Nobody's listening to it. It's like 1 a.m. Just put on the headphones and like get on the show. And so I did it.
Your friend specifically, that was like the only pool of people he used?
He like had us come in like every Thursday night or something like that.
Okay.
I like talked just random stuff, man. I mentioned like Augustine, thinking I knew what I was talking about, but like the truth is like I never read anything by him. I was supposed to read it in college, but I spark notes it. So
and then like quoted him
on
the radio.
Yeah, exactly. So there's my credibility.
Oh man, so you've been on the radio at 1 a.m. answering theology questions?
More like, yeah. I mean, like
this is 5 years ago, like before you ever went to seminary or anything.
Before, I mean, I still don't know anything now. So imagine me 5 years ago. So it's kind of crazy.
Have you ever been on the radio, Allison?
No, I've never been on the radio.
You've never been on the See.
It's okay. I'll teach you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we just jumped into this story. I didn't even really introduce you guys. So Joon and Allison Kang. I mean, I think part of that's because I think a lot of people know you. I think most people know you. But Joon and Allison are both on staff here. Joon works with our Pathways, getting people connected. What do we call it? Pathways? Is that we've gone round and round about this title? What's the title we're on right now?
It's officially the Pathways Coordinator.
It is the Pathways Coordinator. I was right.
But like people out there don't know what a pathway is. So I got asked the question.
So what's what do you coordinate as the Pathways Coordinator?
So I just say I do like member coordinating or volunteer coordinating. Jack of all trades, master of none.
So Joon gets people connected to the church, connected into membership, connected into community groups, connected into equipping. And it's kind of all that. It's the pathway from, getting connected on the outskirts of the church family into kind of the family and equipping.
Better than I can put it, yeah.
Right? Master of all of that.
Oh, sure. Yes.
That's,
amen.
That's Joon. And Allison is on staff here as our children's ministry coordinator. Mm-hmm. So how long have you been doing that now? 7?
I think we might have hit a year.
Have we?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Maybe next month.
Okay.
I don't know.
Something, yeah. It's about that.
I was pregnant.
That's right.
So basically,
so it seemed like a great fit.
Yeah. Basically, the church probably gets an email from me or Joon once a week.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We're just in your inbox.
So Allison coordinates all of our volunteers across all ages.
Yes. Yeah. It's been a season.
Maybe we should use this as a pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Email me, Allison at Cornerstone.
That's why we're on the show.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's a pitch.
They're both here to recruit volunteers.
Yeah.
Which is, I feel like every year, kind of with all staff, but particularly with like your guys' positions, when we ask staff, like, what's your least favorite part of your job? Like across the board, every single staff member is like volunteer coordination.
It's tough. It's tough out there.
It is.
Least favorite strong.
They love the volunteers.
Right. Yeah.
Right. When it's good, it's good.
It's
like,
right.
Yeah.
It's right.
Yeah.
It's the lack of it that's hard. But super thankful for that. Super thankful for the ways in which even through this, you have cobbled together the relaunching of all of our children's ministries. And so, yeah, super thankful for that. So we could talk about all that, but I actually don't want to talk about the staff side of things today. I would love to. I wanted to have you guys on just to hear a little bit about your testimony. I think one of the things that I love is the opportunity for people to share their testimonies, the testimonies of what the Lord's done in their lives and how He has worked and drawn them to Himself, drawn them to where they're at. I think we keep getting to hear such encouraging testimonies of the work the Lord's doing in the life of our church, and the story of what He has done and is doing in your lives is, only a tiny part of that is your staff roles here, right? Obviously, He's been doing so much. So why don't we start why don't we go back even before the two of you even knew each other?
Dang.
How did each of you come to faith in Christ?
You want to take it?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay.
Okay. She's like, why don't you tell my story? You could tell each other's stories.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Nah.
Tell your own story.
Because I
Tell
know
your own
it
story.
so well. Okay, that's fine. I can go. I'm not one that grew up in the church, so I'm going to kind of work backwards here. So I always kind of ask a question sometimes of my own immediate family, and I love my mom and dad and my brother and everything, but I'm like, it's interesting because my mom's younger brother is a pastor in Seoul in South Korea. My grandmother is like a Presbyterian, not only by lineage, but just like at heart, and is such a solid prayer warrior. And my aunt and uncle, my dad's brother and his wife, solid Christians, like went to church their whole life and everything. And then we get my immediate family. And so, we didn't grow up going to church. We didn't grow up really with an emphasis on Christian things. Morality, sure, but maybe not Christian stuff. But I did have a friend and I probably stopped going to church in like third grade, like straight up. My parents were just like, nope, we're not going to church anymore. I think they got burned by like a Korean church, which unfortunately seems to happen. And so, we stopped going to church until I was in 8th grade. And then I have a friend, Taylor. I'll probably send this podcast to him. But I grew up with a friend that lived down the street from me, and his dad planted a church in our neighborhood. And so I actually ended up going there with him. I'd sleep over Saturday nights at Taylor's house, and we would wake up at like 6 a.m. at just the crack of dawn to go set up the signs and go set up chairs. Not a whole lot different than what I'm doing now.
Wow.
Yeah. So I did that for a year. Taylor's dad was a church. It was called Lark Ridge Community Church. He was the pastor there for, I think, like 2 years or so. And so I went to church starting in like 8th grade for probably a year and a half, maybe like 2 school years tops. And then my buddy moved to Wyoming because his dad found a pastor job in Wyoming, in Cheyenne. And so that's when I stopped going to church again. But I was baptized in 8th grade and kind of just like didn't think about it. This is where, so I was sharing my testimony on the radio station. This is where I mentioned Augustine. Because I'm like, man, there's this part in Confessions. This is in the Sparks Notes version, right? Where he talks about being apathetic and he steals like fruit from a fruit farm. And he like realizes, oh, I don't really care about stealing fruit from the fruit farm. I don't care that I did something bad. I don't care. He didn't even end up eating the fruit. And that's kind of how I felt in high school. I'm just like, like, you just don't really care about things. Maybe that's a lot of people's experience. And so I went through high school and I applied to a couple of colleges. I ended up going to Pepperdine because my grandmother was like, oh, you're going to a Christian college. And I don't know if I'd necessarily consider Pepperdine a Christian college, but hey, you know what? It's the beach. So it's pretty cool. And then I went there and then my like sophomore year of college. Towards the end of my freshman year of college, my buddy Andrew really was intentional with me and started teaching me, kind of like leading me back to Jesus. And he was like, you know what? Like, this is really important to me. This is important in my life. I'm just going to share it with you. To use Reggie's analogy of the swimming pool, he loved being in the pool. And he loved it so much he couldn't help but share it with me and invite me in. And so I started getting back into a little bit of the Bible, a little bit of, theology. I didn't really understand it at the time. I kind of thought I was smart, but I wasn't. And then my sophomore year of college, I went to China, and they like elected me as the spiritual life advisor, like almost like this chaplain role in China. And it was like a role I should not have been in at all, because what do I know? I don't know anything. And actually, I don't think I'd still consider myself a Christian at the time. So got thrown into that. And so I was still kind of just like on my way up. Maybe the Lord used me in some way, but then I would say after college is when like I was gripped, and like the Lord kind of opened my eyes and everything. You know what? It was a breakup that really kind of solidified a lot of things for me, which is funny and embarrassing to say live, but it's true. It's
just between you and me.
It's just the three of us. You're cutting this part out.
Yeah, we're good.
But yeah, this breakup happened. I was in this like long-term relationship in college. Thought like things were gonna happen, and I realized at a certain point, I'm like, oh, you know what? Like these Christian beliefs and values really mattered to me. It started mattering to me more and more and more and more. And to my girlfriend at the time, it started mattering to her less and less and less and less. And so I remember at a certain point, in like maybe 2016 or something, I point blank asked her, I'm like, hey, do you think you like believe in Jesus? Like, do you think you're a Christian? And she said no. She's like, nope, I don't think so. I've like kind of walked away. And I wrestled with that. Hard. And ended up breaking up. And I'm like, you know what? This is like the perfect, like the Lord used this to like perfectly reset my life, to reset kind of a devotional heart towards him, to reset, I don't know, my entire worldview, I guess. And so, yeah, I stopped there. And, funny enough, I actually came to Cornerstone in 2015 with my buddy Nate. But and Matt, actually, I went to the first intro class in like 2015, I think. And Matt hounded me for 2 years, like nonstop. This is actually a huge part of my testimony. I don't know why I didn't share this. Sorry, I can go on and on about this, but I share this all the time. But Matt and actually Stephen Lynn, those were the first two people that I met at Cornerstone. And for 2 years, it was like relentless. They were like, hey, you come into the intro class? And Stefan was like, hey, we getting lunch? And every single time I'd say no. I had better things to do. But you fast forward a couple of years, and I start reading about the local church, and it became so compelling. And everything that my buddy Andrew would talk about the local church kind of all came together. All these years of culminating like knowledge about what the church is and who God is and who Christ is. And so, yeah, in like early 2017, I'm like, you know what? I need to like find a church. I need to get plugged in. Like any young person, I'm like, wow, I'm going to live out Acts 2 to its fullest. Like, we're going to do this thing. Plenty of road bumps along the way from then to now about Acts 2. But, that's the long and short of it, man. I came to Cornerstone and like finished the membership classes, I think in late 2017. Joined a community group. And it's kind of cliche to say, but like, honestly, I'm here now because of all of those experiences from before.
That's really cool. I love it too. Like the picture of that. I think actually most of us can probably relate to that, coming to faith as this journey, these like stops and starts and weird. And if you take any one snapshot, you're like, oh, this is it. Or, oh, this isn't going well. Right. But like the Lord was kind of weaving this story together even even when you were disinterested?
It's a really hard question for me to answer. When did you become a Christian? I'm actually not a fan of that question.
Well, and that's why I actually love it, because I think most of us can resonate more with that as well. I mean, some people have that clear moment, but it was this series of relationships and experiences and walking away and being pulled back, and that oftentimes I think is what most of our journeys are like.
Yeah.
And so that's really good. And now you're the guy who hounds people with emails.
Oh yeah, totally. I'm the hounder now.
So okay, so what about you, Allison?
Yeah. So similar to Joon, I did not grow up in the church. I'm from Texas, so from the Bible Belt South. But my family was not one of the families that was at church every opportunity that the doors were open. I think that, like, looking back, it's interesting because my family thought God was a good thing. And like being moral was a good thing, but there wasn't any emphasis on going to church. So I think I probably would have said my entire life that I believed in God, but I did not know who God was. And so flash forward to high school for me, and I have 2 older sisters. My middle sister was getting into a lot of trouble at the time. And so my house was really chaotic. And Bible Belt South, all my friends go to the youth group. And so I took any opportunity I could to just be out of the house and be kind of away from what was going on there. So I started going to church simply for that reason. My friends are there. I don't want to be at home, so I'll go to church. And I think that God really used that for me to have an interest in God and faith. I have a moment where I prayed to receive Christ, but I relate to, like, I look back and I'm like, I didn't know a lot there at all, but I prayed there. The youth group was hosting, it's like a traditional Bible church, like a D Now weekend. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's just a youth weekend where you have all the spiritual highs and everybody, there's like a cry night where everybody cries. And there's this moment where they do a, what's it called? Where you like call? Like
an altar call?
An altar call.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I responded to an altar call.
Nice.
Where they're like, okay, like everybody who wants to pray this prayer, like open your eyes and look at me. And I always laugh because I wanted to pray the prayer, but I didn't want to open my eyes. So I say, I prayed the prayer that night, but my first act as a Christian was rebellion. Like, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it on my own terms. So, you know, based on that entry point to Christianity, I had a lot to learn still. And then, you know, my family situation, I was truly the older son from the prodigal son. Like, I remember reading that and not understanding at all what the older brother did wrong. Like, I would read it over and over and I'm like, he's right. Like, I don't get what's going on here. So I think repentance and my understanding that I was a sinner took a long time for me. I'm moral. I'm a good person. I don't drink. I don't party. I don't do all these things. I'm a good person. So my need for faith, I think, took a lot longer for me to understand that I couldn't do things on my own. So step into college, in late high school, I like prayed the prayer, didn't really have a lot of great examples of what it meant to walk with God on a daily basis, though. And I knew that I wanted to learn that. So I chose college based off of where I didn't know, none of my friends were going. I thought, like, I'm going to go somewhere new. And like, faith was going to be like the most important thing to me. So untraditional, again, that's what I was seeking in college. First thing I sought out was places to grow in my faith. And that's how I got involved in the college ministry that I eventually worked for. And I think that was pretty instrumental because I hadn't had examples up until that point. And so I had a lot of questions. I wanted to know God. I wanted to know what the gospel was, but kind of was just ripe for the picking. Like, I just needed someone to tell me. And so college was like crazy growth in my life. I like kept journals. I've showed Joon this, but like
the Bible.
Yeah, I would read like a whole passage at a time and then just like summarize it, which is like what you do in seminary. I just like wanted to know so much. But then in 2014, my dad suddenly passed away. And that to me is where theology came alive because it was all these things that I like knew in my head, but I hadn't experientially had to like step into actual like I'm gonna believe this when I don't want to believe this. And so I look at that as one of the most like deep growth periods of my life, because a lot of the grief I was experiencing was God. Like God wasn't who I thought he was. And it was for the better, but this God that I'd kind of built, this comfortable God that that kind of gave me what I wanted and life was easy. All of a sudden, like I have a dad who's just died that I know didn't know the gospel. I had felt like an urging to share the gospel with him and I didn't. What do I do with all of this? What do I do with this theology that I've learned about and now I kind of don't like? And so, yeah, I think that I can look back at that single moment happening and even say like everything that's happened in my life today is a result of that, a direct result of that. And so, yeah, I think that that's kind of the long and short of my story.
And so after that, after college, you did you go directly into college, doing college ministry?
I did.
So why did you take that step? Like how was that? What was that process like?
Yeah. So in college, I just told you how like gung ho for my faith I was. So I had been telling my mom all throughout that I was going to be a missionary to a country and not tell her the name of it. So like that was the track I was headed on. And then when my dad died, I kind of had full-time grief period for a while. Like I was not okay to go overseas. And it was at that time period that I would have been making that decision and I should have been going overseas. And so that was how at the time, I knew that I wanted to be in ministry. I knew that, I guess the reason why I studied international relations when I was in college, and was really passionate about wanting to see like global change. And at a certain point got really frustrated of like, well, the world is broken. I don't really see how I'm going to like make a significant change. And so I think that that's where the heart for ministry kind of came out of. And then I thought it was global ministry, realized I'm not in a position to go overseas. So I interned at the college. I went to stateside as opposed to internationally. And then I did that for
interned with the college ministry.
Yeah.
Like the campus
ministry.
Yeah.
I did that for a year or 2 years. I can't remember. And then decided that my life is always a series of leaps. Like I kind of like, I love leaping. I feel like that's like when I have like, I feel my faith. Like I like to kind of like test myself in that way. So I feel like that's the second significant leap I took. One was going to college where I didn't know anybody. And then I was like, well, I'll move to California where I don't know anybody, continuing to work for the same college ministry, but got assigned out here to USC. And so that was the beginning of my LA journey.
And so you were working on campus at USC?
Sort of. Technically, that was where I was assigned, but I actually worked mostly on a lot of community colleges.
Okay.
Trying to launch and like find new students and a lot of evangelism and launching kind of stuff.
So what was it that, I mean, I know it's never like really one thing, but how do you describe that just kind of desire for a ministry, even vocationally ministry oriented life? Was it that passion that came out of the international studies and be like, okay, I want to try to be a part of the solution, or was it kind of just like one step after another? And
probably a combination of both of those things. And just a genuine joy for talking with people. I think when you're in ministry positions, people kind of open up to you. And like all you have to say, like I even sense like I'm in an Uber and someone says, what do you do? Like, oh, I work in ministry. And the door just kind of opens for so many conversations. And so I really enjoy just getting to be a conversationalist with people, getting to listen and share pretty openly. So I think there's probably a little bit of a natural heart of evangelism, just naturally.
Yeah, for sure. So actually, I'm going to reverse these questions. Joon, you now are in seminary and are also pursuing vocational ministry and pursuing pastoral ministry at this point. How did that come about? Right? Like how did you go from kind of the Lord finally grabbing a hold of your life in a unique way and making a pivot toward vocational ministry?
Dang, dude, that's a good question. I love this question. Well, so when I graduated, I was a manager. I was an assistant manager at the Target on Balboa and Nordhoff and Northridge. So shout out to the Valley Boys. So I worked at that Northridge Target for like 3.5 years. And I loved it. Dude, I was making a lot of money. I was making lots of money. And it was great. I mean,
you were a good Target manager too.
I think I
feel like that was like the impression. Like I just remember.
I would show up to church sometimes in like red and khaki. You know, you just rep it hard.
Are you saying accidentally?
Maybe, I don't know. It's like all I owned, I guess, in terms of collared shirts.
That sounds like you.
So, yeah, but I was a manager at Target for 3.5 years, and I kind of like, I remember getting that job straight out of college and going to dinner with my friends and being like, I'm gonna advance. Like, I will not leave this company until I advance in this role. To which, to a certain degree, I did. But you know, I when I started getting plugged into Cornerstone, I think this is an experience that many people feel, especially in Los Angeles and especially for the post-grad crew, where you're young and college it's an environment where everyone is headed in the same direction. Everyone kind of has a similar goal in mind. And so in terms of being involved in fellowship in college, it's really fun and it's exciting because everyone's trying to do the same thing and everyone's growing exponentially in leaps and bounds, like Allison was saying, in their faith and in their professional life and just as a person. But when you get out of it, you kind of lose a sense of direction. I'm 21, 22 years old. What do I do? Where do I find friends? All my friends are moved away. And so I started talking to Matt when I joined a community group in the fall of 2017. Matt kind of just like invited me to do stuff with him. I remember I picked up a bunch of cardboard boxes with him one day. And he, I griped to him, honestly. I was saying like, man, this community group that I'm in, I feel like I'm not building community. I think it's something that a lot of people feel kind of on the other side of things a little bit. And I get it. And Matt was kind of just like, he used this hose metaphor. You have to get under the water. If plants are getting watered, if you want to get water, you kind of have to step into it. So be vulnerable, share. And it ended up being awesome. Like I love that community. It's funny. I actually lead the same community group that I was joined. So it's this weird kind of transition. But so I started developing like a relationship with the pastors that way, I think. And one thing that I had a really big heart for was sharing the gospel in the workplace, which is always a good thing to do. Always do it. Always share the gospel at the workplace. And I would especially share it to my HR manager. Who actually is a really close friend of mine, not a Christian, but I would always like ask these questions and talk about the gospel with her, and people would join the room, right? And I'd be like, "Hey, what do you think about truth? What do you think about religion and what's your worldview and stuff, right? Just stuff that young people ask." And I was telling Matt one day, I'm like, "Dude, I like really I want to like share the good news with people, and I want to like challenge people in what they think." I remember Matt said this. He said, "I'm not a son of a prophet. I'm not a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but perhaps you should think about doing something with this." I don't know if it was a gifting or not, but he's like, think about what can you do with this? What can you do with this gift? I'm like, I don't know, man. I certainly don't want to go to seminary. And I certainly don't want to leave this job. So it started this maybe like 2 year and a half long journey to where I somehow got connected with you. I remember thinking you were Brian. I remember the first email I was thinking about the email that I sent because Matt's like, hey, you should get connected with Scott about perhaps more ways you can get plugged in with Cornerstone in terms of like outreach or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it said. So I remember this email. Hey, Scott, I heard you are big into coffee. Because, I heard Brian say on the pulpit something about coffee. I'm like, oh, I heard you're into nice coffees. And I got the reply back, oh, I'm more of a tea guy. Coffee would be Brian. I'm like, oh, that's embarrassing. But yeah, that's kind of how I got to know you a little bit, right? And I mean, you really took me under your wing, like heavily. Like we would meet up probably once, sometimes twice a month, man. And you just ask me what I'm doing and tell me to read 1 Timothy and come back. I went over to your house and sat in your backyard for like 4 hours, just like loitering, and this is my favorite part of the story.
Discipleship by loitering. That's my style. That's my style.
So I mean, you guys were huge in my life, man. And I remember the challenge came, man. You're like, you should go. You kind of laid down two options, right? You can go to seminary. You might, if you want to go, like, if you need to know more, go to seminary. If you feel like you can do this without having a deeper, maybe not deeper, just like a more thorough understanding of things, don't. But I remember there was a certain point where you're like, you should lean towards seminary. You should lean towards gaining a little bit more knowledge about this stuff to do this. I'm not sure what you were thinking, at the time. Like, I don't know. I didn't say anything that stood out. I remember questioning you over and over and over and over again. Like, what? Like, why are you doing this?
You had a lot of questions.
Like, what is this? I'm like just this scrub that works at Target, dude. Like, what do you see? What is in me? And, now I know, like, it's like, it's just the time and effort that you poured into me. And it's awesome to see that. But yeah, you kind of said, you should go to school. I'm like, okay, I'll apply. I'll apply to seminary. And I applied on my phone, believe it or not. I was laying on my couch one day. I'm serious. My application to seminary was all done through my phone. So if that tells you the qualifications of seminary, I don't know.
But typing up questions just with your thumbs.
Yep. 2 thumbs.
Yeah.
And I told him, I'm like, Scott,
essay questions.
I was like gung ho for it. I remember telling you, like, there's scholarship opportunities opening up. There's like stuff that I can do. I'm really excited for this. I get to be a student again. And then I got the application letter, and that tone changed immediately. It was like, oh no. Now it's like, I got to put in a deposit and I got to make a life decision. I got to tell my folks. Oh my goodness. You remember, I tell you this all the time. I think there was one moment where it came to a head for me was I was talking to my buddies and I'm like, I don't think I'm going to go through with it. I told everyone that I was, and I told everyone, like, I'm on board. I'm going to go to school. Let's do more for Cornerstone. Right. But I'm like, I'm changing my mind. I can't leave this paycheck and I can't leave this career growth, man. I can't do that. And so I didn't tell you this, of course. And so you and Brian took me out to coffee one day. Oh, geez.
I totally remember that.
You guys took me out to coffee. The car's like, it has a good energy. It's got good vibes. You're like bouncing. We're going to like Ella Brew, which is bomb coffee.
Yeah. We're laughing.
You're laughing. You're having a good time. I'm sitting in the front seat, man. I'm terrified. I'm shaking. I'm cold. And we get there. Order our coffee, sit down. I'm like, I have something to say. I decided I'm not going to school. I didn't go through with putting down my deposit. I'm not going to do it. And I don't know. I think you always say you weren't mad. I don't think you were mad, but you could tell the vibe.
The energy changed.
Oh my goodness, did it change?
The energy changed.
And Scott just went from smile, I wish you could see my face right now, to this. And I don't think you said again, I don't think it was anger. It was just more like, why didn't you tell me this stuff? And I remember Brian had to like, he came in and he started talking to me about all these, how Brian does existential stuff. He's like, you have 2 open doors, man. You got to choose one. I'm like, oh, geez, I guess that's true. You go through one, another door closes. And he's like, that's what it is. You want to go to law school? You want to be, choose your career? That's fine. But just know, like, this door is it's gonna close. Yeah. Maybe not permanently, but for the time being, it's gonna close.
Yeah.
And it was so convicting, man. It was maybe your face was convicting. I don't know. But I went home that day and I put it down my deposit. I'm like, I'm going to school. Now, this can lead into some of the house stuff, right? But unbeknownst to me, that meeting was where you were going to make a job offer to me.
Yes.
And provide a place for me to stay. Unbeknownst to me, he kept that paper hidden. He didn't show that to me intentionally. This was so good because it did. I don't know. That's a lot. It's just like a lot of trust, or I don't know, maybe frustration. I'm not too sure. But I didn't know that. I didn't know any of that. But anyways, I went home that day and I submitted my deposit. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do this. And then the consequences thereafter, I'll deal with it. And that's it, man. That's how it started. Lots of, it's just lots of kicking and screaming and digging my nails into the floor, and the Lord kind of dragging me. He's like, hey, you're going to come with me. It reminds me, you know what? It reminds me a lot of Gideon. I want to say Moses, but I'm like, dude, I'm not Moses. But Gideon he needed signs over and over and over.
Yeah. No, I remember that. And that's so funny to think back on. And because I was surprised, and I wasn't angry. Like and that's where I wanted what was best for you. And part of that is like, I also didn't like, I also recognize, and particularly at this point in life and ministry, recognize the weight that the voice of a pastor can have, and try to be careful not to like put the thumb on that scale and be like, I think you should do this. That's probably God speaking. You should listen. Like I never want to do that, while also trying to provide like the perspective and the wisdom along the way. And it's also an interesting dance, because, and I've seen this with, even with all of our current pastors, like all of them, and elders and church planters, all of them have taken these leaps and recognized God calling through either difficulty or sacrifice or a not knowing how it's going to work out. And it was funny because I think in that moment, like, I didn't want to be like, oh, here, I can make it easy for you. Would you go if I made it easy for you? Right? You know what I mean? Like that, like I was like, oh, like that. And so I was kind of caught, right? I'm like, well, I don't want to try to convince you by making it logistically easy.
Right.
Like, in light of where the Lord had led you, like, I wanted to come and like support you and make it easier in that, but I didn't want to like try to convince you by making it easy. Which
is no way to enter seminary.
No,
you don't. You don't want to enter like that.
No, like, well, I wasn't really going to, but it just kind of seemed like the easiest thing to do, right? Like that's like that's not. But what's so cool about it to me also is how the Lord did and orchestrated through that, right? Like we don't know what each other always exactly need, what exactly that journey entails, but the Lord was working in your heart in a whole host of different ways that, I love to see how he builds his church in ways that we're like, oh wait, this isn't anybody's master plan except for his, right? And it's been cool to see. So, and it does bring up, so at that point though, after you, committed to seminary, started going to seminary, you moved into the mission house here. And this is actually a helpful, so the two of you just moved into the mission house.
We did.
Like a couple
last weekend.
Last weekend,
Yeah.
right? So this is kind of a new.
Crazy.
So for those of you who don't know, we have a house on campus here at the church. It's owned by the church, and for a lot of years, it was used as a place for missionaries to come when they were on furlough, when they were visiting, a place for them to stay. Probably about 5 or 6 years ago, as we were thinking through just strategically how to both care for our partners, how to train up the next generation of pastors, of church planters. Really, and still to this day, the biggest hurdle to training people here in West LA is housing.
Mhm.
Like, is being able to house them while we train them, because well, you all know why. But and we realized that it was a lot easier to find places for visitors to stay, even like rent an Airbnb, even if we were going to rent an Airbnb for 2 weeks while someone was here visiting, that was way cheaper than housing somebody permanently. And so we kind of made a strategic shift to repurpose the house. And we still generously house our global partners when they're visiting, just in different ways. But we repurposed the house and have used it over the last 5 or 6 years for people, couples, families in training, and for during a season of ministry training. And so that was at one point just kind of an original like place just to even get you started, right? Which was a huge blessing. And then and now after it's where Demetrius and Estella have been living in preparation for the church plant to make that possible. And as they've kind of finished up the training and the pastoral preparation of that, and as they've moved on and gotten sent out, I'm super excited that you guys are now moving in there. And as you both finish up seminary and also kind of finish up this season of ministry training, and for both of you, with you, Allison, both not only working on staff here, but also in a season of ministry training, right? In discipleship training and counseling training, going deeper in your training. This is it's exciting to me to be able to help facilitate that here locally, close to and as a part of the church community, but also in a season where even as a young family, like to be a young family that is freed up enough to not only get ministry experience, but to be trained in ministry for whatever the Lord has next. It's just a huge blessing to have that capacity as a church family. And I'm excited for how the Lord's doing it now. And so at this point, so why don't you give me a little bit of, so that's a little bit of background for people and kind of what the house is, how we're using it, and how I'm really excited that you guys are going to be utilizing that for the next year or two. How did you guys meet?
We met June's first month in seminary.
That's
so
right.
What's crazy, there's lots of crazy things. First of all, when I think about our story, we don't know each other apart from June being in seminary. Like dating, like marriage, baby, like everything has been in the context of seminary. So that's going to be an interesting adjustment for us.
Yeah.
And we always joke that if I met him when he worked at Target, which was like only a month difference, we don't know like where the story would have gone.
Maybe you'll like me more.
Maybe. Maybe went on some nicer dates. What was your question? I just forgot.
How did we meet?
How did we meet? So I was really close with the Dillard family, who goes to Cornerstone. You guys probably know. When I moved out here, said I didn't know anybody in LA. They were on my team, and they invited me to live in their home, essentially sight unseen. Like we didn't know each other at all. And they were like, we'll move our third kid out of his bedroom and give it to you.
Yeah.
And so in that season, I grew really close with them. I lived with them for like 6 months when I first moved to LA. And they're really good at setting people up. They would always like invite someone over for dinner. like so-and-so is coming over for dinner. You should come. And so I was kind of used to that dynamic. It was always like just meet new people. But your experience of that was a little different the night they invited you over. So you can explain your side of it.
Oh, you want me to explain you don't want to explain everything?
No, you're better at this. Well, actually, here, I'll explain a little bit. At the time, June was responsible for locking up the church. One Sunday, I think it was at 5:00. It was back when we saw the 5:00.
Yeah.
And Brian was like, "Hey, I have someone for you to meet," like in his pokey Brian Dillard way.
Oh my.
And you want to take this?
I could say that. Yeah, that's fine. No, actually, I want to hear your side. Keep going.
Well, what I think is funny. So he Brian convinces June to come over, like, with the purpose of meeting me. They just told me to come to dinner, so I didn't know that. But June, like in his previous to that night, he'd been going through a phase where he didn't want to shower. He had read online that if you go long enough without washing your hair, that it would self-wash. And so, yeah.
I need to qualify this a little bit.
No, I don't know if you do. I don't know if you do.
It's okay.
That's just what happened. And so he hadn't showered in he'd showered. He had not washed his hair in maybe almost a month at this point. He hadn't shaved. And so he was looking pretty rough. And then this opportunity to meet someone, I think, snapped him back into shape. And so he rushes home, showers, and in his rushing, he forgets to lock up the church. I think Danny was like, dude, it was all open. You just left it open.
Man,
so
I don't remember that.
So that was the night we met.
I gotta show you the picture.
Nobody can see the picture.
I probably have a really, I probably have a detailed email from Danny to the church. I don't know what's going on, but the church is wide open.
Yeah.
It was all because June met Allison.
Yep.
That's awesome.
So where we were living previously to moving is where I lived single and the house that we met in. Mm-hmm. And then now we're moving back to the house where June lived in prior to us being married. So we just can't seem to get away from the places.
Kind of meta, right?
Yeah.
Whoa.
So, there's so much there. There's so many stories. I know you guys could tell about that process, but maybe to wrap this up, I want you to think about. I mean, it's only been a few years, and so much has changed, right? You met, got married, now have a baby. Mm-hmm. Now we're on kind of the back end of seminary, kind of both still engaged in a season of ministry training. Mm-hmm. When you think about when you look forward to your heart for the world, for the church. I mean, you're preparing for something, right? You're preparing for the Lord to use you in and to strengthen these gifts and to explore how He wants to use you in the world, in the church. What is it that's most compelling to you about what God is doing in the world and in the church that makes you just want to commit your lives to and sacrificing all a bunch of other things you could be doing in your lives for that purpose?
That's a good question.
It's a great question. Deep.
Yeah.
So deep. You got anything?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is just that there's lots of unknowns, right? We really don't know what's the next step ahead of us. But we have all of these examples of how God has moved like crazy, not just in our lives, but in the lives of people around us. And I think that's what I get so excited. I'm like, I have seen God move and I know He's going to do it again. And that's both in my life and in others' lives. After my dad passed away, my mom came to faith. I never would have seen that coming. And so just when you live life with people long term, you see God do things that might not have been your plan, but end up, you truly see things working together for their good. And for your own good as well. But I think that the ministry side of it for me is just knowing that God is good, that He is trustworthy, and that He has plans. And I want to see those plans happen. And I like being a part of it.
Oh. What a privilege to get to be a part of it, right?
It's good. I got to follow that. Oh, man. There was a staff meeting during the height of kind of shutdown, lockdown, that I remember, I think it was you. It might have been Brian.
Still get 'em mixed up.
He still can't keep it straight.
Yeah, still one of you guys, where you said that Cornerstone as a church, it could die, it could disappear, but the Church of Jesus Christ is going to still grow and produce fruit, and no power can stop it. No power on this earth, I should say, can stop it. And I thought that's been kind of the, like, in the back of my head, what's been fueling a lot of life, I think. Yes, I love our church, and I love Cornerstone specifically, and I love our pastors, and I love all the opportunities it's afforded me, and I love the people and the community groups and everything about it. But at the same time, I think what I realize is being trained up for ministry is a lifelong, seasons-long, various callings worth of a role. It's not just preparing for ministry, maybe specifically to be at Cornerstone, West LA, but it could be preparing for ministry, doing whatever avenues that the Lord has. And so I love that phrase of the church isn't going anywhere. Like, the church isn't going anywhere. And so I think that's like the fuel. That's the fuel that keeps me going, is being trained up for ministry. I don't want to just learn how to preach. I don't want to just learn how to counsel, but I want to just become a holistic man of God. I tell people I would drop out of seminary if it weren't leading to growth. If I weren't growing through it spiritually, I just would not see the point in it. And I mean, thank God that he has, and he's been really doing a lot of the growing in my heart. And so I think that's my big purpose behind it. I love Allison's answer. It's actually very difficult to follow up that answer, because there's so many people who have been impacted by the gospel that just are in our immediate sphere.
Yeah.
Allison's mom being one of them. I think for Allison, me being one of them. And just so many of our friends have been impacted, and maybe their faith was revitalized, or maybe they came to faith for the first time. And I think especially in the city, that's in LA, I think specifically, it's an exciting opportunity, not just because it's LA and it's Hollywood or whatever, but it's an exciting opportunity kind of in the grime of everything. Yeah, so you kind of think about Jeremiah 29, and you think, man, these guys are going to be in captivity for 70 years. And yet, throughout the captivity, throughout the burden that comes with it, plant, root, be a community of God's people, right? Have families, work. And I think that is kind of how we see Los Angeles, how we see the world, maybe not even LA, specifically for us LA, but how we want to see the world.
Yeah.
We're here temporarily, and it's burdensome. It's like what Paul says, like, I'd rather depart and be with the Lord, but we're here, right? And let's make the most of it.
I would just add on to that. I think that we have conversations a lot of why do we commit? I think we use the word commit a lot. Like, we're committed to Cornerstone, and we're committed to LA. And it's simply because this is where God has us. Like, he has not opened any other door. So we're going to be as faithful as we can to where we are. And we think about how it would be a lot easier to be, in another city or other places. But we're here because God has us here. And that's like just the short and the end of it. So.
Well, I'm super thankful for that. I'm super thankful for the fact that he has you here, and for that commitment, because I think of the fruit that it produces. Both, I'm practically thankful for both of your roles, and how just so much of what you do, even here for the church, facilitates not just your ministries, but so much of other people's ministries, like our community group leaders, our children's teachers, like just laying the groundwork for all that to happen is a huge blessing. But to be engaged in that with a vision for something larger than just making stuff happen, but for the hearts that you both have for the glory of God in the transformation of lives and the way in which the local church, not as organization, but as organism that God is continuing to grow and multiply and transform is such a blessing. And it's just so fun to get to take a minute, take a beat, and reflect on all that he's done. And I feel like even just in your guys' lives, we've just scratched the surface, right? This is just, just a little, but reflect on all he's done. And in so doing, anticipate all that he has in store for you, for us, for the church, for everyone, in ways that often will be different than we expect, and greater and more exciting. And we kind of prepare, we get equipped, we engage in faith, right? Yeah. That's exactly what he's doing. And so for some, it's like formal, a more, formalized season of training, maybe like seminary, maybe it's a more formalized season of training, like the counseling equipping you're doing, Allison. And for others, it might just be like being equipped to be a community group leader, right? Being equipped to share their faith at work. But whatever it is, we do it not even necessarily knowing exactly how the Lord's going to do it, but in faith, knowing that he loves to over and over and over again use those steps of faith for his glory and the multiplication of his gospel in our world. So,
amen.
Well, thanks you guys. Thanks for the time. Thanks for just your friendship. It's a huge blessing.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Seriously.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you guys should all try the no shower thing. I just want to throw it out there.
We should end now. Let's not have a whole church that doesn't shower.
Thank you for listening, and thank you for showering. We will see you on Sunday.